Throwback singer-songwriter Ray LaMontagne is back with another album of 70s flavored psychedelic folk rock. Is part of the light a nostalgic trip worth taking? My review is coming up next on Track by Track. Hey everybody, my name's Kyle and this is Track by Track, music reviews, news, and commentary. Thanks for tuning in today, and if this is your first time here, please take a second to click subscribe so that you won't miss future reviews and more. Although the new album from Ray LaMontagne arrived on my doorstep on Friday, it took me a couple days before I had time to dig into it. It was Sunday morning, in fact, as I was relaxing with a cup of coffee. As it turns out, that was maybe the ideal way to begin my journey into Part of the Light, Ray LaMontagne's 7th studio album. Like most of the music that he's released in the past, this new album is predominantly comprised of what I've sometimes referred to as Sunday morning music. Now, that reference has nothing to do with anything spiritual. I'm not talking about church music or hymns here. To give credit where credit is due, it's a phrase I borrowed from Counting Crows. Their 2008 album was called Saturday Nights and Sunday Mornings, which was also the overarching theme for the music. The first half of the album was up-tempo rockers meant to represent the party atmosphere of a Saturday night, while the more easygoing songs on the second half were meant to evoke the more leisurely feeling of a Sunday morning. It's a concept I like a lot, actually. There's a lot of albums that I've listened to and I've thought, that's Saturday night music. But for my Sunday morning soundtrack, I'm usually looking for something a little less aggressive, whether I've had a Saturday night kind of night or not. Ray LaMontagne is usually a perfect choice, so my Sunday morning frame of mind was probably the ideal state for dropping the digital needle on his new album. The opening track is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. On To the Sea, LaMontagne describes a day trip that could very well be taking place on a Sunday morning. His lyrics are evocative, but not at all provocative, as he sets the scene and he puts us right there in it along with him. In the opening lines, he sings, "I'll be waiting in the car. Don't forget the camera. If you wouldn't mind, could you find my yellow shoes? I think they're under the stairs." Both musically and lyrically, I get a really strong Paul Simon vibe here. More specifically, it's kind of reminiscent of the Simon and Garfunkel song, America, in the way that it features such vivid storytelling. And when it comes to Sunday morning music, Paul Simon is definitely one of my go-to artists. As Ray kicks off track 2, he seems to be holding on to that same kind of vibe, but then, about 30 seconds into Paper Man, the electric guitars kick in to take things up a level. It's not an alarming about-face by any means. We're still firmly in 70s AM gold territory here, but plugging in, Ray is able to add a little muscle to this otherwise tame bit of protest music. Then on the title track, LaMontagne seems to be channeling one of rock's legendary protesters. Part of the Light owes more than a small debt to John Lennon, both musically and lyrically. It's a classic plea for peace and love, delivered with a dreamlike performance and tons of Ray's trademark deep reverb on both the vocals and instrumentation. It's a mode that he stays in for the next 2 songs as well. Both It's Always Been You and Let's Make It Last are essentially love songs, which is of course a subject that lends itself well to that kind of ethereal production. The problem I have is that all 3 of these songs feel like they run a bit too long and overstay their welcome. If they were each about a minute shorter, I think they'd benefit from that editorial touch. By the time Ray is singing Let's Make It Last on the final chorus of that song, I was actually thinking, you know, I could use a change right about now. And we definitely get one on track 6. As Black as Blood is Blue takes us to a whole new and unexpected place. After spending much of the first half of this album channeling Nick Drake, LaMontagne goes full-on electric on this Iron Butterfly flavored track. As I listened, I thought about how 50 years ago this sound might have been called hard rock or even heavy metal with the fuzzy, distorted guitars. Of course, by today's standards, it's just rock. Still, this song is a real wake-up call at this point in the album, definitely more Saturday night, so to speak. The first time I listened to this album, it felt like this throwback rocker kind of came out of nowhere. Now it's one of the songs I look forward to most. It's not out of character for Ray exactly. We've heard him play in this space on other albums, but it is a bit out of character on the album. If anything, it makes me want to hear more in this style. Ray dials things back again on Such a Simple Thing. This was the lead single from the album, so it should be no surprise that it has all of the acoustic hallmarks of some of his best music over the course of his career. The song opens with a melody that's extremely reminiscent of the Rolling Stones' You Can't Always Get What You Want, and it actually builds in a similar fashion into the second verse. The production here has a bit more presence to it, keeping the vocal more up front rather than burying it in effects, which sounds really nice. I also like the slide guitar accents on this track. They give it a little bit of a country vibe, which is a cool change of pace. It sounds great on the solo as well. This is definitely an album highlight. Then on No Answer Arrives, Ray plugs in again for a sort of dirty and gritty psychedelic 12-bar blues number. In the same way that the slide guitars added such great texture to the previous track, we get some really cool organs on this song. They have a strong Pink Floyd kind of feeling, although I wouldn't draw that comparison to the rest of the instrumentation. There's a darkness to this song that's definitely in contrast to most of the rest of the music on this album. I like the song a lot, even if it feels a little out of place. Speaking of Pink Floyd, you'd be forgiven for wondering if Goodbye Blue Sky, the final track on Part of the Light, might be a cover of one of that band's classic songs from The Wall. It isn't, of course, but the song still has a very strong Pink Floyd feeling to it. Perhaps that's some lingering inspirational remnants from LaMontagne's previous album. The Floyd influence on Ouroboros was extremely prominent, but where that album seemed rooted in the early 70s era of Floyd sound, this song feels more grandiose, more late period Floyd. Also, at 7 minutes long, this is easily the longest track on the album. In fact, it's the second longest song that Ray's ever put on an album. But unlike some of the earlier tracks on Part of the Light, Goodbye Blue Sky doesn't ever approach the verge of being tedious. It has an epic quality about it, well, modestly epic, that serves both the song and the album well. It's a satisfying closer. Overall, if you've been listening to the music of Ray LaMontagne for a while, you won't find many surprises here. It's Ray doing what Ray does best. But that feeling of familiarity may be the album's weakness, or maybe Ray LaMontagne's weakness in general. You can't help but feel like you've heard some of these songs before. By and large, it's still a pleasant enough listening experience, but about half the songs don't really seem to stand out as anything truly new. Most of those are what I've called Sunday morning songs. Yet it was the Saturday night numbers that really caught my attention, demanded it really. Those were the songs most steeped in vitality that I wanted to hear more. And while the album is well enough produced by LaMontagne himself, I have to wonder if the album might have benefited from the perspective of the objective ear of another producer. Ray tapped Jim James of My Morning Jacket to produce his previous album, and Dan Auerbach of the Black Keys for the album before that. On the whole, I think both of those efforts fared a little better than this one, so perhaps it's fair to give at least some credit to the producers. In the end, I'm giving Part of the Light by Ray LaMontagne an X rating of 6 out of 10. It's a reasonably solid album that's likely to meet fans' expectations, but only occasionally exceed them. Once again, my name is Kyle, and this has been Track by Track. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Plus, be sure to check out some of these other videos below that I think you might also enjoy. And of course, be sure to subscribe, because true music fans always want new releases the day they come out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.